So Congressman Schneider, last year, as part of the House Abraham Accords caucus, you formed a bipartisan Gaza Working Group to prepare for post-conflict recovery. So this was particularly focused on engaging Abraham Accords partners in planning relief, reconstruction, and sustainable peace once Hamas is no longer in power. So I want to ask, what role do you see for these key parties, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, in rebuilding Gaza? And also separately, how can Congress effectively coordinate with both diplomatic and civil society actors to ensure that economic recovery lays the foundation for long-term stability?
Great, and thank you for the question. Before we even get to answering that question, I want to go back even further. We're here marking the 5-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords. And I think, I don't know about you, I can actually remember when they were announced. I remember the day because it was August 13th. And August 13th, I was actually on the phone with a dear friend of mine who had lived in Chicago for a very long time. It's his birthday. He's an Israeli diplomat. And I was calling to wish him happy birthday when suddenly it was like, oh, news, and big news. And I don't think you can overstate how big that news was. And I was on the White House lawn when the Abraham Accords were signed. And for someone who has been committed to the pursuit of peace between Israelis and Palestinians in the broader region, this was the earth shifting. It was truly tectonic, and the hope that went with that. And then, jump ahead just a little bit, and we formed the Abraham Accords caucus, bicameral, bipartisan, Jody Ernst in the Senate, myself in the House, among others, because we knew how important it was. And Congress wasn't going to be in the driver's seat of the Abraham Accords, but Congress has a critical role to play in supporting and helping strengthen and spread the message of peace that the Abraham Accords established. In particular, the message that both Jews and Arabs belong to the same land, and that peace will be achieved when both recognize each other, and working together they can lift up the land and the people on that land. And there was great optimism 2 years ago. Right around this time, was there a possibility of a normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis? And we were literally holding our breath. And I had been to Israel, as Jessica mentioned, in August with a group of freshmen, new members, first-term members, many who had never been to Israel before. We had stood in Kfar Aza looking into Gaza and knowing where things were. The message, by the way, at that time was that things are quiet and that maybe we have good things ahead. Never has been a thought so off as that one thought, because October 7th, we know what happened, and in no small part because the progress that was being made in the Abraham Accords. And before I get to talking about the Gaza Working Group, I think we have to note that here we are almost 2 years since the start of this horrific war, and the Abraham Accords have stood strong, and the relationships between Israel and the Arab states that have signed agreements with Israel have held up, tested, strained, but still holding, and we got to make sure that they continue to hold. With respect to the Gaza Working Group, I have maybe a genetic defect. I'm preternaturally optimistic. I believe in the future, and I believe in the possibilities of peace, and that good people can find a way to live together. That good people and those who are pursuing peace must stand strong against the enemies of peace and not let the bad guys win. And from the very beginning of the war, October 7th, I remember my son woke me up at 6:30 in the morning saying there's something happening, it's different. Over the days that followed, we weren't, as we collected more and more information, the horrors of October 7th settled in. There will always be a tomorrow. We don't know what it's going to look like. So the idea, and I should introduce Gil Thompson, who is my senior advisor on many matters in foreign policy, in particular in the Middle East. And it is worth clapping for Gil. He is amazing. We were talking about, we don't know how or when this war ends. It could last a few weeks or a few months. Remember, this is 2023. But we have to have a plan for what follows. And we have to have a plan, and there were phrases that we used is we have to replace the terror infrastructure, the tunnels under Gaza, with the towers of opportunity, neighborhoods with schools and homes and jobs. That's the path forward. How do we get there? And again, Congress is not going to drive it, but Congress has a opportunity and a responsibility to be there to help move it forward, to help clear away obstacles and provide the fuel to move that forward. And as the war extended, and it wasn't a war of weeks or months, we're now looking, as I said, at soon to be 2 years, there has to be a future for Gaza that is distinct and free from the reign of terror of Hamas and the threats to Israel. It has to be a future. If we're going to be successful in what we all are working for, it has to be a future where the Israelis can live in security and peace alongside, and the Palestinians can live in security, peace alongside each other, building their future together. And so the Gaza Working Group, in its creation, was a sense, how do we make sure that members of Congress, many of whom will have come, and now we have even more who've come post the initiation of this war, learning about Israel and the Middle East, and not decades of challenges, but millennium of history. How do we make sure that it's not necessarily top of mind, but on a back burner, ready to move forward when the opportunity presents itself? And that's what we've been doing. And we have had, last year, we had meetings with the ambassadors from the Abraham Accord countries, the Israeli ambassador, UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. We had all together, one via teleconference because he was in, I think, Germany. We met with the ambassador from Saudi Arabia, all to make sure that our colleagues were staying engaged. And we have to keep that. We have to keep awareness, we have to build understanding, and we have to hold on to the hope that peace is possible.
Thank you. That's so critical, holding on to that hope. And I, too, am an optimist, and I think being in this business, we all need to be at some point to keep going. So you mentioned your optimism 2 years ago, and that the Accords countries haven't left during this difficult moment. Let's juxtapose that, though, with what we, I think it was last week or a week and a half ago, and there was an announcement in Israel of potential settlements, and then there's the Emiratis who have also come out, and they have a red line. So I just want to hear your reaction to that, and how does that play into this mix? How does that impact what is happening today and what we hope to see in the future?
And at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to go back 5 years ago, not to August of 2020, but to June of 2020. And there was, at that time, talk of annexation. So the first, if I hold on to the idea that within the Abraham Accords, that both Israelis and Palestinians belong to the same land, and you have to find a way to live together on this land, that leads to, you can follow a number of different paths of assumptions to conclusions. The idea of a single state, binational state, doesn't achieve the aspiration and goals of either, and creates a permanent situation of conflict and violence, in my opinion. And so the path I've always gone down is finding a way for two people, Israelis and Palestinians, finding a way to achieve their aspirations, respecting and recognizing each other, living with security, stability, and peace, ultimately prosperity. Annexation leads down the first path and blocks the second path. And I was very concerned about that in June of 2020. It was the ambassador from UAE, Ambassador Teba, who penned an op-ed that opened a door. I joined with several of my colleagues at the time, being very outspoken against the idea of annexation at that time. All of the things that were working together, I believe, contributed to creating the possibilities of the Abraham Accords. Jump ahead 5 years, there are folks in Israel who are again talking about annexation, and what was true 5 years ago don't go down this path or you'll lose this opportunity that is presented to us, and thankfully people on both sides grab that opportunity. I think we're at a place now, and the UAE has made this clear, that if Israel goes down that path, it has the likelihood, not the possibility, but the likelihood of cleaving the Abraham Accords to such a point that may not be recoverable. Now, as we talk about this, we also have to talk about the moves by other countries, in particular in Europe, to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. Recognizing a Palestinian state before the elements necessary to be successful as a state, the institutions, having elections, having responsive government, having control of all security under one authority, it's not there yet. And building the trust. October 7th, the trust had always been strained to fractured between the Israelis and the Palestinians before October 7th. October 7th devastated that. And so to even be talking about recognizing a Palestinian state before other steps have been taken, perceived, giving the perception of rewarding the actions of Hamas on October 7th, that creates a dynamic that is also a threat. So we have to look at it on both sides, and this is where I wish we were getting a more robust leadership from the United States to say there is a future for all peoples in this region. We can't let those who are the extremists, the maximalists on either side, block the opportunities or the path that we have to move forward upon to achieve that peace, which is the Abraham Accords.
Thank you for that. And so speaking of going back to opportunity, you've emphasized the importance of people-to-people and economic connections in your work as it relates to sustaining the Abraham Accords. So I want to ask, what role do you see for American businesses, especially in sectors like clean energy, ag tech, fintech, and how can these help deepen commercial ties among the Accords countries? And also, you mentioned the congressional role in helping to support. So how can Congress help facilitate more U.S. private sector engagement in these regional partnerships?
Great question. I'll split into three pieces. The people-to-people first, right? Understanding between peoples is achieved not by heads of state, but by building bridges and connections between the folks who make up each state. And that's true whether you're talking about relations between the United States, our neighbors, countries around the world, but in particular in the case in the Middle East. And I know when I lived in Israel 1983 to 1984, it was easy to drive around the country without any barriers or obstacles. I had the chance to talk to people of all different backgrounds. And my understanding when I got to Israel, this was the year right after I graduated college. I'd never been to Israel before. Meeting people, meeting Arabs and Israelis, meeting Israelis who'd come from Arab countries, you expand your understanding and you expand your appreciation of each other. Today, if you go through the region, whether you're in Israel or in the West Bank, likelihood of talking to young people, and I'm going to put young people between 15 and 30-year-old range, saying, how many people of the other side do you know? Odds are they have never spoken to someone on the other side. That breakdown is critical. So we have to build the people-to-people connections, not just between Israelis and Palestinians, but across the region, and creating the surrounding organizations following the Abraham Accords. If I look what's been happening between the Abraham Accords countries, so many different groups came in, NGOs, government-supported organizations, that's critical. And I think where Congress can have a role, the Nita Lowey Middle East Peace Initiative, we've been funding some of these, trying bridge building. We can do more of that. But at the end of the day, people's economic interests kind of rise above all. In politics, there's a saying, it's the economy stupid. If you can build economic bridges between people, if you can build connections of folks who have extraordinary ideas but need capital, and people who have capital looking for extraordinary ideas, and you can do it where the boundaries of countries have less significance than the opportunities provided by the ideas and the capital, you start building those bridges. And I can think of so many different cases. There's a reason that so many tech companies have planted roots in Israel around research and development, because it benefits the companies. And Israel, it benefits Israel, and it goes together. If you can start expanding those roots and again, fundamental beliefs, I believe that all people have the capacity to be extraordinary in their creativity and their potential to succeed if given the chance. If you can expand that research possibility to the entire region, you can bring the capital of the Arab states. Many of them have sovereign wealth funds because of their oil and are looking for ways to diversify. You start building those ties. So it is a combination of, at the first level, personal connections, relationships, trust between people, supported by institutions, both government and non-government, and then the economy becomes a piece of it.
So speaking of building bridges, you are also, in addition to co-chair of the Abraham Accords Caucus, you are co-chair of the Congressional Hellenic Israel Alliance, CHIA, another caucus that AJC is proud to support. And so talk to us about the link between agreements like the Abraham Accords, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, and also IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and how they benefit Americans and how they can in the future.
Thanks for the question. I think, look, we're on the cusp. There's times in human history where things change. You reach a disconnect in change in technologies. And the rate of those moments are shrinking, from early periods till agriculture was a long time. You can run through the whole history. I want to run through the history of the world. But we are at one of those moments, whether it's advances in AI, quantum computing, the need for the energy to support all of these, the need to address providing the energy, growing energy demands at a time where how we do it will have an impact on how the climate and atmosphere respond, those challenges that are existential, but that human creativity and endeavor can tackle. We're just at one of these extraordinary moments. And energy is going to be a key piece of that. Countries that have energy, countries that need energy. The Middle East, it's called the Middle East for a reason. It is in the middle. But you can think India on one side of that middle, Europe on the other side of the middle, and you draw the line, and it is, if you can create IMEC, the India Middle East corridor, you can build that. It is a place to move energy back and forth, but also goods and services, and do it in a way of working with people who are again, pursuing peace. That's critical. And the Eastern gateway of that vision is, this is why CHIA is so important. We're talking about Israel, we're talking about Cyprus, we're talking about Greece. As we look to the day after and the future for Gaza, a Gaza that is post this war, a Gaza that's given the opportunity not just to rebuild, but to renew, to be a piece and a part of that. Egypt, all of this is connected. So if we can create the foundations for commerce and trade, for moving energy from where it is in the earth or coming from the sun, opportunities for solar, and getting it to where it's being consumed, you're going to create those connections between the governments and between people. So that has to be a part of it. So I think CHIA is vitally important to that. I think IMEC is vitally important to that. And I think there'll be new and other ideas that will help be a part of that in the future as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned Gateway, so you actually have legislation called the Gateway Act. And so if you want to give just a 2-second.
Thank you. So yeah, we do have the IMEC Gateway Act because we have to look at the opportunities for this India-Middle East corridor, not being an arrow going from India up to through the Middle East and into Europe, but going both ways. And if we can build that relationship. So we are hopeful that this is going to move forward. And in a Congress where very little legislation can get traction, we believe this is one that we can bring both parties together to move on.
Thank you. So you've traveled in the region. You've been in Israel since the October 7 terrorist attacks. Based on your firsthand experience and your conversations in the region, how are regional leaders and communities thinking about the Israeli-Palestinian file? What is on their minds at the moment? What is the sort of this moment that we're in? Are there viable opportunities or emerging pathways for progress here towards a sustainable resolution?
There are viable opportunities and pathways. I mean, I see the most obvious pathway is the Abraham Accords, and we've got to hold that and create those opportunities. This trip I took last month, we met with both Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also the Prime Minister of the PA, Mustafa Mohammed. You are dealing right now, I believe, let me qualify this, I'm an engineer. That doesn't make me an expert in all things, it just makes me think I'm an expert in all things. And I'm not a sociologist or a psychiatrist, but the peoples in this area are traumatized on all sides. And it is something that we as Americans sitting here thousands of miles away can't fully comprehend. But what I believe we bring to the table is the ability in a period, in a region so abjectly affected by trauma that it's hard to see the distant horizon. Our distance here gives us the ability to see the possibility for that peace on the horizon, and we have to hold that. So, you know, I don't know that you'd find any, if certainly not many Israelis who are ready to talk about making a long-term commitment to a two-state solution peace with Israel. We shouldn't be talking to them. You have to see this, because right now what they see is there are 48 hostages in Gaza. We want our hostages back. And we're in a public space. I usually would have expletives to that. Give us our hostages back. You're looking at a Palestinian people who are saying we want to be able to rebuild our homes, provide for our children. Give us what we need to do that. We here have a responsibility, but I hope also the ability to see both sides and see what the possibility is moving forward, and recognize that, A, this war needs to end. It needs to end as soon as possible, immediately. Bring every single one of those hostages home, reuniting them with their families, not just the living, but the deceased. Surging aid into Gaza, making sure that the people of Gaza have the fundamental basic needs of food, medicine, but then once the war is ended, getting Hamas out of Gaza so that the people of Gaza can rebuild and build new communities and build a vision for their future that isn't a threat to Israel, but a promise to their children.
And you mentioned the hostages, so I also just want to take a moment to thank you for your leadership in Congress, advocating for the release of all of the hostages. And it's so important what you and your colleagues are doing to draw attention to this. If I can ask you on that note, share what you have been doing as it relates to the hostages. How are you, making sure that this is a priority for the U.S. government, that this, remains an active conversation, and that you and your colleagues have this at the forefront of their minds, and the hostages are not forgotten?
The most important thing we can do is make sure the hostages aren't forgotten. I wear my yellow pen every day on my lapel, wherever I am, irrespective of where I am. I have a yellow wristband. The hostage dog tags was giving me a rash on my neck, so I carry it on my keychain. So it's always on my mind. We have to make sure it's always top of mind for other people. I was at a charity dinner last week in Chicago where Rachel and John Goldberg spoke. They're from the Chicago area, and Rachel gave extraordinary remarks. These are two of the most impressive, powerful, heroic people, but Rachel finished her remarks is, may the hostages come home tonight. And we have to always pray, may the hostages come home tonight. May this war end today. We have to keep a focus on this, and we can't let anyone forget. And within the confines of these halls, with my colleagues, I have the pictures of the hostages outside my wall for all to see. and my office is just down the hall from the place where everyone does their press conferences in the Cannon building. So it's having the pictures. Every hostage parent I've met, I have their child on my wall in my office, so I see every hostage is on that wall. It's making sure that's there. We have to ensure that the hostages are not forgotten, that all the victims of this war are suffering. This war can end when Hamas releases the hostages and ends its threats against Israel.
Thank you. You said it so well. We need to ensure that they're not forgotten, that the world does not forget about them, and we need to ensure their safe release and that everybody returns home to their families. Let me ask you one final, just give us some words of wisdom, give us some optimism here.
So the wisdom I'll give you, and then I will give you optimism. We were laughing back there. I thought I was grabbing a grape, and I grabbed a tomato, which was a shock because I was hoping for something sweet. So the wisdom is, it's knowledge to know that a tomato is actually a fruit. It's wisdom to know not to use a tomato in your fruit salad. The optimism is there's always a tomorrow. And we in our country tend to think of history, ancient history, being, we're going to celebrate our 250th birthday next July. That seems like a long time. In the Middle East, we are talking about histories that go back more than 3,500 years. Jericho has been continuously occupied as a city for, I believe, more than 5,000 years. The Jewish people have lived in the land of Israel continuously for 3,500 years. There is a long history, and if you have the privilege of walking around Jerusalem and the wall around the old city, it's a Turkish wall, and the Turkish control of Jerusalem was 400 years from. If I think I have the dates right, it's 1516 to 1918. Right? That all seems like ancient history, but it's the relatively recent history for the Middle East. The Middle East has a long history, a long future, the same way it has a long history. Our role, our responsibility, and the ability to hold on to optimism is to make sure that that's the future that gives hope to all the people there and brings peace. Because peace in the Middle East, and I'm talking not just between Israelis and Palestinians, but the broad region writ large, is not just good for the people of the Middle East. It will make the people of the United States more safe, more secure, and more prosperous. So our stakes are there, and we'll stay focused on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your important work, for leading this bipartisan group, and the many bipartisan groups that you do lead on Capitol Hill, and we appreciate your partnership here. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Good to see you.